All right, take it away, Tim.
All right. So this is the month of October, which is Cyber Awareness Month or Cybersecurity Month. I forget which. The next slide actually says it, so I probably should have just waited. Um, and this is for through the Peterborough Town Library. If you have any questions and you're on Zoom, please feel free to write them in the chat or raise your hand. If you're in person, just raise your hand or let Mary know in some fashion. There are different sections of this, which we will stop for questions. This is a fairly large amount of text, and partially it is that way so that you can have something to go back and reference. I'm going to skip over some of the sections, but if you find them particularly interesting, there will be time at the end for questions. The other kind of fun aspect of this is it's kind of geared towards a small business slash homeowner, which is oftentimes a difficult line to walk across. So I hope we do it well. And if Mary has your contact information, you will get a copy of the slides, so you don't have to write anything down. And you will also get a copy of the recording. The recording will be on YouTube, so you can reference that at any point. And the fun thing with the slides is the next time we run this class, I will update the slides. So, and if you check back in a couple of years or 1 or 2 years, you might see new information on the slide as it gets updated throughout the years. All right. October is Cyber Awareness Month. So that's why we're doing it in October, if anyone had that question. So CISA, CISA.gov, put October as Cyber Awareness Month, and that started in 2004. And basically this is an effort to just raise cyber awareness so that, or cybersecurity awareness, so that people could kind of get information and learn a little bit, and then hopefully be more secure online. One of the sites that has really good information, and also during October, they have a kind of a little class you can go through along with pamphlets. They have posters, they have little cards, stuff like that, that if you're a part of a business, you can print out and put on the walls. And they also have kind of a step-by-step. Each week you have like a new kind of learning experience you can go through to learn more about cybersecurity. And that's nice because it goes at your own pace. Also, if you are a business, this is not sponsored, but if you are a business, you can pay for KnowBe4 for your user base, for your employees, and then you can get continual training throughout the year. Just in case you're wondering what it takes to be a cybersecurity professional, 4 years undergrad, and then you either have a 2 to 4 year master's degree. There are a lot of certifications that you can get, and it's basically because the landscape changes so often. You have to do a lifelong continuing education, essentially. So why should companies care? These are some fines that were levied out based on data breaches. So this is where a company has lost the information of customers. And these are fines that the US government or Europe has put on those companies. So you see the largest is DD Global. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, but the one people are most commonly able to remember is the Equifax breach, which cost Equifax $575 million, which came out to a appallingly low dollar amount for each individual that was compromised. So here are some stats, just to whet your palate. The average cost for a business of a single ransomware attack is $1.85 million. So a lot of money. The far scarier point to that, or comparison to that, in my opinion, is that breach discovery takes an average of 197 days. So what that means is someone is a company can be compromised, they could have their data stolen, and on average, it will take 197 days for that company to find out that it has been hacked. So the real question is, what has happened between them getting hacked and then them figuring out that it happened? The breakdown for the commonality of attacks, phishing/social engineering is 57%. These are kind of more of the emails that you're not supposed to click on, or the calls that you get. So these are kind of more of a automated or specific targeted attacks at a certain business or just the population in general. 33% are compromised or stolen devices. This could also include some of the phishing social engineering, because if they click on a link and then their device gets compromised, that will be added into this 33%. And then the last one is credential theft, which again will oftentimes happen because of social engineering or a compromised or stolen device. Who is behind data breaches? It is 70. I know the numbers don't add up, but it's outsiders are 70% of the time. So that's people who essentially have no connection with an organization. 55% of data breaches are from organized criminal groups. So these are people whose business plan is essentially to create data breaches, get the information, and either sell it or use it for some benefit. And then 30% of the time, it's someone internal to the company. Cybercrime is up 600% since COVID-19, so that's always fun. It's estimated that cybercrime will cost companies worldwide $10.5 trillion each year by 2025, and this is up from $3 trillion in 2015. 75% of security professionals consider social engineering the most dangerous threat. So the takeaway from this is the most important thing you can do to protect yourself is to not click on things, to not click on an advertisement on a website, to not click on a link in an email. In general, just kind of individually be more aware. And that's one of the things that KnowBe4 is really good at. Their training is focused around the individual and having the individual person learn what to click on and what not to click on. So if you're in a business, some terminology you'll see thrown around is the CIA triad. It sounds like it's a combination of the US government and the triad's Japanese, right? And the triad, or no, Chinese, two organizations conspiring together. But in reality, it stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And these are just kind of catch-all terms that you can kind of go through and think about of how you can make them better for you or your organization. So confidentiality is privacy. You want the information to be private. It's confidential. Integrity is you want your data to be protected. So the main thing with this is with ransomware attacks, one of the reasons why they're so effective is because a company will lose their data. If you do not have a backup or a way to stop your data from being altered, then ransomware becomes much more deadly. And then also availability. People who aren't supposed to have access to the data should not be able to access the data. So it should only be accessible to authorized parties. Generally, this means within your organization. So defense in depth is another one of those terms. And it is kind of like an onion. It's a layered approach to security. So on the right-hand side, you can kind of see a little info or a little image, where on the outside, you want your policies, procedures, and individual awareness to be kind of the front line. So people, shouldn't click on things or should be aware to not click on things. The next is physical, then network, then computer, then application, then device. And we'll go into those in a little bit. Defense in depth is generally broken out into these points. So firewalls, intrusion prevention or detection systems, endpoint detection and response, network segmentation, least privilege, strong passwords, and patch management. Some of these will go over in greater depth than others. So for example, endpoint detection and response is generally more focused to a business and will generally cost money. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I believe this class is mostly for people who are individuals and not here on behalf of their company. So firewalls. This is a hardware software and it controls network traffic. What this allows is it allows the device itself to stop malicious activity before it reaches you. So before it can interact with your computer, this device has already blocked it. So this stops it from ever being a problem or a thing you can click on or interact with to cause a problem. IDS and IPS, so intrusion prevention or intrusion detection systems, are basically there to monitor the network traffic and send an alert generally to an IT team or an individual when it detects something anomalous. Or on the more advanced systems, it will automatically prevent those actions. The takeaway is if something weird happens on the network, your IT team will get alerted. One of the annoying things about these is that it can detect an anomalous thing happening and it is in no way bad. The other annoying thing is they generally cost a lot of money. And the third annoying thing about them is you generally have to have a decent amount of knowledge on the system in order to make sense of what it is telling you. Endpoint detection and response. This is the software that is on your client device. So basically something that is on your computer, which provides antivirus protection. Network segmentation is another business specific thing. And it's basically saying if an outside actor breaks into a salesperson's computer, they would be on a different network to the finance department. And what that'll mean is that if someone breaks into a salesperson's computer, then they can't from there jump onto the financial person's computer, which would probably have a greater impact to the business. The principle of least privilege is essentially if someone does not need access to something, they shouldn't have access to something. So the same example as before, if a salesperson's computer or account gets compromised, that person or computer is unable to access the payroll application or process. There's no reason for the salesperson to be able to interact with the payroll system, so they shouldn't have access to it in the first place. This is one of my favorites, strong passwords. One of the easiest ways you can protect yourself is to have a strong password. So a password that isn't easily cracked or guessed, and a password that is individual to that service. So you don't want to share passwords. You want them to be somewhat complex, all of that fun stuff. Also, this kind of deals with multi-factor or just authentication in general, where if you sign into your bank, you should also have it set up to also send a text or something to your phone so that you have to verify that it is you logging in. So what this means, what multi-factor means, is that if someone gets your password, that doesn't immediately mean that they can access your account. They would still need that second device in order to authenticate logging in. Patch management. This is a fancy way of saying, please update your computer. Please update your phone. Oftentimes, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit next month with buying a device, But in my view, as soon as a device is no longer getting security updates, for example, a cell phone, you should get a new cell phone, because once it's at a certain point, that device will no longer receive security updates. So any vulnerabilities found after that date, your phone or device is automatically susceptible. One example of that is Maersk. If they had a single computer patched, which was the infiltration point, it would have saved them $870 million. So if you see a pop-up that says Windows would like to restart your computer in order to apply updates, essentially what I'm saying is you should say yes to that. All right, so before we go over individual products, and I realize I went over that very quickly, I just like to give a large amount of time for questions and answers at the end. Are there any questions so far?
Anybody have any questions about the terminology? He threw a lot at you. Yes.
When you subscribe to like Xfinity,
Mhm.
they have their own multi-layered security system. So, for instance, we wouldn't need a fire or an Infinity
Using,
Wi-Fi, because they do it.
Tim, did you hear that? Tim?
No, it was a little faint.
Okay. What he's basically saying is that, sorry, let me get out of that. If he gets his Wi-Fi from a Xfinity, which has its own firewall, does he need to have a firewall, a personal firewall, since it's being protected by Xfinity?
Yeah, sure. So, kind of. So the firewall that is built into routers, depending on the router, is good. Let me check. I don't know why this didn't update. There we go. The ones that are built into routers are generally good. They are a different tier, however. So if you have a device such as Comcast, it will come with some sort of firewall. The general negative with that is it's not incredibly strong. And oftentimes, if you're getting your device through Xfinity, you don't have an incredible amount of control over it. You don't have a lot of options that you can do in order to make it, better or more secure. So on the left-hand side of this page, for example, essentially what is on there are firewalls that are built into devices that are on the cheaper side, or are devices that would provide you Wi-Fi. On the right-hand side are more of the business applications. So if you want to be secure, there is some level of security that is given with the device that Comcast sends you. But if you want to be a little bit more secure, you can get another device with an additional firewall on it, which should protect you a little bit better than the built-in generic one from Comcast or FirstNet or Consolidated, whatever they're called these days.
And we have 2 raised hands on Zoom. Kathy, why don't you go unmute yourself and go first? Oh, I'll get you.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you wanted to share with people the difference between if Windows is popping up something saying you need to update versus a spam or virus things popping up and saying, oh, you've been infected, click on this.
Yeah, so oftentimes a very common attack is you're browsing the internet. A pop-up window will happen and say, hey, this is Windows. You've scanned your device and found 2,000 viruses on it. Call this number to get support. that is fake. The main thing to remember is that if something creates a sense of urgency, you should take a long look at it. So if something gets on your computer, it will impact what it wants to within 10 seconds. So realistically, there's no real cause for emergency because it's either happened or it's not happened. You can take the minute to kind of gather your thoughts and figure out if it's real or not. So if something is a browser pop-up, you know it is not real. If something is small, tiny on the bottom right, and it says, Windows would like you to update your computer, the easiest way to check to see if that's real is to ignore it and go to Windows Update manually by just going into the system settings. And similarly on Mac, a small tiny pop-up in the top right will say, hey, we would like you to update your computer. And once again, you can go to, I believe, the App Store and get the update from there. So you don't need to click on something on a pop-up in order to update your system. You can go to your system and update it manually and bypass the kind of the scariness of clicking on something.
So Joanne, you're
Thank
next,
you.
and then we'll get. Joanne, do you want to unmute yourself?
Right, I just want to check if I already have Sophos, the antiviral thing, I still need this Sophos XG86.
Yeah, so there is a firewall that is built onto your computer,
Right.
and it is pretty good. The problem with them is that means the thing has already interacted with your computer in order for that firewall to block it. What these firewalls are talking about on this page, it's a separate device that will intercept essentially bad things before they ever get to your network or to your computer. So this is another layer of the onion. This is another added security.
Do you plug this into your modem router?
Yep. So for example, I'm a big fan of the UniFi system. I think it's a good mix between usability and security and price. And what you would do is you would take whatever box, for example, that Comcast gives you, you would plug the UniFi device into the Comcast box, and then you would plug your computer into the UniFi box. So you have the Comcast, whatever level of firewall that is, then you would have the UniFi device that would also provide a firewall, and then you would have your computer. So it would go in between.
Okay, so then you plug the firewall into the modem router, and then on the other side, you would plug into the firewall. That?
Yep. Or you would plug your Wi-Fi into the firewall. Basically, you would just have the one cable from your Comcast box to the router or firewall, and then it would connect to your computer.
Is that what are those extra things in the back of the modem for? Is that what
Yes, those are what those the Ethernet ports in the back of the modem are for.
Okay, so that you plugged it in where you would plug in the Ethernet also.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a question in the room, and then we have one more person has their hand raised. So go ahead. What was your question?
A question about those devices at the bottom of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Are those what is recommended?
I don't know if you heard that, Tim. She's wondering if the images that you have at the bottom of the screen are the ones that you would recommend.
Yeah, so the ones on the bottom of the screen, left versus right. The one on the left is the UniFi Security Gateway. That is purely the firewall. I would generally recommend to go with the Dream Machine, some version of the Dream Machine, which is essentially a UniFi Security Gateway and something else. And then on the right-hand side, we have a SonicWall. So the list of things on the left-hand side are more consumer focused, and the ones on the right-hand side are more business focused. In this context, what business focused means is way more money. So the device itself will cost a lot more, and you will also have to pay yearly to access the security part of the device. So the ones on the right are far more for business applications, and the one on the left are more for a home user.
So just to follow up, if I may,
Mm-hmm.
if you have a MacBook at home, does he recommend getting the one on the left just to have extra protection?
So I don't know if you heard that. She has a MacBook at home. She was wondering if you recommended the Unify as an additional firewall for her Mac.
So this is slightly pedantic. I don't like to give recommendations, but what I will say is at my house, I use Unify. When my friends ask for what they should get, I say Unify. If my parents asked me what they should get, I would say Unify. I'm not saying Unify is the best, but it is the one that I use and I'm the most familiar with, which would allow me to kind of help them out if they have any problems in the future. And then on the right for businesses, SonicWall is what I'm most familiar with. So again, that's what I would, use purely because it's what I'm most comfortable with. I will say, Unify, you're looking at about $400. And the ones at the bottom, near the bottom, the Netgear Nighthawk, the Asus, and the TP-Link, those ones are cheaper. They just provide a little bit less functionality, but they are more plug and play. So they're easier to kind of just plug it in and you're good. You don't really have to touch it that much. The other fun ones are the OP-N Sense and the PF Sense. Those are free, but they require you to run it on a computer that's in between your modem and your computer. And if that sounds complicated, then that's not really an option. So the individual things, Netgear Nighthawk, Asus, TP-Link, Unify, they're all good. I just happen to use Unify the most often.
Okay, so there's a question from Madeline, but we should go to Linda first because she's been very patiently had her hand raised. Linda, go ahead and unmute yourself.
My question is, when you get a notice for an upgrade with your computer, is it safe to automatically just download it? Or is there a possibility that anything inside the general upgrade you may not want or is unsafe?
So there's two parts to that question. The first part is if your computer is loudly yelling at you to upgrade, I would take a step back. I would relax a little bit. I would not click on anything in that message. I would go to your computer itself and go to if you're on a Windows computer, I would go to Windows Update and I would run the update from there. Because the message may or may not be real. And you kind of get around it may or may not be real by just going directly to Windows Update. And I forgot what my second point was going to be on that.
Thank you anyway.
Yeah.
You'll come around, but you'll come back to it. So, and
Yep.
hold on a second. Madeline had a question in chat. Go ahead, Madeline. Do you see the question in chat, Tim?
Yep. Am I a fan of a separate router and modem or combo? That's kind of personal preference. In general, I am a fan of separate devices. That's generally because if a device is designed to do one thing, it will generally do that one thing better than a device that tries to do multiple things. Again, that's huge generalities. The other reason why I like separate devices is say you want to get a new router, or you want to get a new modem. If you have a router modem combo, then you're going to be paying more to upgrade essentially both of them at once. Whereas if they're separate devices, or if, you know, one of them, or if something breaks, you only have to replace one thing as opposed to one thing that is two things. I probably said that slightly weird, but I prefer the separation.
And we had another question in the room. Go ahead.
What about apps on your computer like Malwarebytes? They do a good job?
She's wondering about software protection like Malwarebytes on the
Yep.
computer.
Great question. That's a slide that we'll go over in a little bit.
Right.
All right, that was a good Q&A in the middle.
Mhm.
All right, so let's continue on. I basically went over this page, but to consolidate it, I'll go over it again. On the left-hand side, under cheap-ish, these are the ones that you would generally get if you are a home user, or maybe if you're a small business. And on the right-hand side is if you are a small business or a medium-sized business, or if you just have money and want to be more secure. Also, if you have any sort of like process validation, or if you have any sort of, I'm forgetting the word for it, but if you have any sort of like security checklist you have to go down because you deal with sensitive information, the ones on the right are the ones that will allow you to fill out that checkbox as being secure.
Okay.
All right, IPS and IDS. I don't really recommend these for home users unless it's already built in. So I'm going to kind of blaze over it. But on the left-hand side, these are the ones that are cheap-ish. The ones on the right are expensive-ish. On the left-hand side, you kind of get it built in with UniFi, so you don't have to buy a separate thing. And I will say that some of the ones on the left where it says it's free, what that means is how valuable is your time, because you will spend hours and hours having to learn how to set this up and monitor it for it to be useful. So this is more of a business thing.
Mhm.
Antivirus and anti-malware. So again, wonderful. The main negatives to using this as your only form of protection is this means that the bad thing has already interacted with your computer in order for your computer to find out that it's bad. So free-ish Windows Defender that is built in to your Windows computer. It is perfectly fine. It is serviceable. It is within a couple of percentage points, give or take, of some of the more expensive versions. If you don't want to think about it too much, just remember to keep Windows Defender updated, and you should be fine. Kaspersky is pretty nice. Bitdefender is really nice. Malwarebytes, I absolutely love. Malwarebytes has a free version. There isn't a really strong reason for me not to say you should have Malwarebytes, the free version, on your computer. You can manually hit the run button, which is essentially the negative of the free version, once a month or whenever you feel like it, and it will scan your entire computer. It will try and find bad things, and it will remove them automatically. The reason why you would pay money for these is if you manage devices, in my opinion, if you manage devices. And what that means is if you have a house and you have 5 computers in that house, you can use a paid version of these in order to manage the security on all of your devices instead of having to physically go to each device and make sure it's updated. That's the reason. That's really what you're paying for, is your ability to say, hey, I'd like to update all of my devices right now. Or if you are able, or it will also notify you, hey, computer B has seen this malware on it. So you'll get a notification that a separate computer than the one you're currently using has found something. So that's kind of where the power of these comes into play. But if you don't want to think too much and you're on a Windows computer, Windows Defender is good. Malwarebytes, the free version, is a really nice update to that. It's not in place of, it's in addition to. And you spend no money extra. And as long as you keep those two programs up to date, you should feel a little bit more secure. If you notice at the bottom of this page, I have a link. This is avcomparatives.org. Essentially what they do is they install tons of malware on tons of computers, and then they put these antivirus software on them, and then they run them and they see which ones are the best. So if you want to see which one is, theoretically the best for this particular point in time, you can go there and check that out.
Okay.
Network segmentation. If you are a home user and you do not already know what network segmentation is, I highly encourage you not to bother with it, mainly because it is just going to really confuse you. If you are a business, then hopefully you can ask me, Q&A time, but hopefully you know kind of what that means. But it's just a way to separate your network out so that something that affects network A won't get on network B. And these are some companies that help with that. I see a question. Do you need to run Malwarebytes with free home Sophos? So one of the things I like to say, and it kind of gets a little bit complicated, is that Sophos, Windows Defender, I kind of view them as software that will try to stop. They're really good at trying to stop something from getting on your computer. And then they're kind of good at removing stuff that's already on your computer. Malwarebytes is just really good at removing stuff that's already on your computer. So I would use it in addition to an antivirus.
Great.
Yep.
How about Malwarebytes Premium?
Malwarebytes Premium, it's good. It kind of adds a little bit more of the automated stuff where it will scan things that are incoming. It'll as soon as you download something, it'll automatically scan it. It's very good. I have no problem with people paying for it. I personally don't. I personally use Malwarebytes more as the check to see if everything's okay, as opposed to the ongoing automated protection that something like Windows Defender would provide.
We have, Joanne, before we get to your comment, we have another question in the room. Go ahead, Jerry.
You mentioned using Windows Defender and Malwarebytes for a Windows computer. How about an Apple computer?
Did you hear that? He's questioning what to use on an Apple.
Okay, so Apple has versions of all of these things except Windows Defender. So I would use Malwarebytes on an Apple computer as well. Apple has its own built-in security, just like Windows Defender. But top of my head, I don't think it has a very catchy name, but it is also something that is built into the operating system. So as long as you keep that up to date, you'll essentially have Apple's version of Defender.
Would you add Malwarebytes to that?
He's asking if he should add Malwarebytes to what the antivirus that Apple offers.
I don't have a strong reason for anyone not to use the free version of Malwarebytes. So I would say, in addition to, Malwarebytes is an absolutely fantastic tool.
And Joanne had a comment in the chat.
Sofo said problem running to remove Malwarebytes. So that might be a thing. One thing I will say is one of the reasons why you don't want to have multiple antivirus things on your computer is they will fight each other. So a antivirus software really digs into your computer and is very hard to remove. And it does things that will make other antivirus software think that it's a virus because it's getting so hard to remove. And occasionally they will do battle to the death and sometimes kill your computer. In general, Malwarebytes, the free version, because it's not doing any of the automatic scanning, it's not doing any of the automated stuff. You have to press the button in order for it to look. Other antivirus software kind of get along well with it. I would have to see exactly the error message that Sophos is giving, but that's why you generally will stick with one. And in my opinion, add Malwarebytes. Generally things don't fight Malwarebytes that much, but they will fight each other. So for example, McAfee, part of the install of it is to disable Windows Defender, just so it doesn't fight.
Oh, we have one more question.
We pay for Trend, virus software. What is your opinion of that?
Perfectly serviceable. The reason why something may not be on this list is just because I haven't used it, so I can't talk to it.
Could I also use it with Malwarebytes?
You should be able to. If it yells at you to not, generally it shouldn't, but sometimes they'll say, hey, you have to uninstall Malwarebytes in order for this to work. I've been seeing that less and less over the years, but it's no real harm in putting Malwarebytes on there and giving it a shot.
Thank you.
Yep. Least privilege. Again, this is mostly business. It's slightly inconvenient. Basically what this means is the account you use to use a computer should be one with least privilege. So if something gets on your computer, it will get on under your account that doesn't have very many permissions, and it won't be able to do as much. Whereas if you have one account to log into your computer, that means it's an administrator account, which means it has access to everything, which means if a piece of malware gets on your computer, it now has access to everything. So the way around that is to have two accounts, and whenever you want to do something on your computer, it'll say, hey, you need to input your username and password for an administrator account to make this change, and then you would type the password in for the administrator account, and then the computer would do what you wanted it to. It is slightly inconvenient. It is, in my opinion, more useful for businesses, but it is something you can do on your home system. Strong passwords. We've done classes specifically on passwords and password managers. Essentially, a strong password is a couple of different things. The main thing is length, and also that it isn't shared with any other account. So for example, Home Depot had a breach a couple of years ago where any username or password associated with Home Depot was compromised. What that means is the attackers got the username of your account and the password of your account to Home Depot. Now, imagine a world, I'm sure no one has ever done this, where they share the username and password of a store like Target or Home Depot with their financial institution. So same username and password to log into your bank. What the attackers were then able to do is they were able to try to log into, Chase, Discover, Citi. They were able to try and log into all of those different services, all those banking institutions with those username passwords to try and log in. One of the things a password manager allows you to do is have really, really long, complex passwords that are very, very hard to guess. And then the added benefit is you don't have to remember them. So you can have separate passwords for all of your accounts, and it's not something that will hurt your head trying to remember what it is. So I do have a short example of the old way, which is now very incorrect, and the new way to make a password. So a strong password. You've seen this before. Your password for a website has a minimum of 8 characters. It needs uppercase, it needs lowercase, it needs a number, and it needs a symbol. Great. Let's do the bare minimum. So, for example, 8-character password, C, whatever the hell that is, at, RA, right bracket, right, whatever the alligator is for fractions, or whatever. And then T, and then the number 2. I don't know about you, but I just said it and I've already forgotten what this password is, right? All right, but it kind of looks hard to guess. You know, you're not casually going to stumble upon this password. You can't find out that my favorite, you know, football team is the Steelers and then get this password from it, right? Fairly secure in that aspect. So let's take this password and let's go to how secure is my password? Let's type it in. Does anyone have a guess? All right. The call and response on this is, you know, generally not the best. So I'll just pretend like people answered.
Okay.
If your answer was 2 days for a computer to guess your password, you would have been correct. You can tell by the orange in the background that that is not a good number. So let's go back to a memorable password. So I'm not saying you're going to remember this password, but it at least is a lot easier to type in than remembering where that symbol is, you know, and it's very, very long. Not that hard to type in. It's kind of nice for mobile phones where you don't have to hit through the, you know, the one button on the bottom left, and then you have to hit it again to get to the weird characters. Don't have to deal with that. So let's check to see how secure this password is. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Sextillion years.
I think
Sounds like a
that's-
lot.
It does sound like a lot.
So very seems like this password would be very secure. And the best thing with a password generator or a password manager, they generally will have password generators in there. The best thing is you do not have to remember any of this. You just go up to the top. I don't even, the Zoom thing's blocking my view, but there's Bitwarden installed on this browser. I would go to, for example, the New York Times. Bitwarden would say, hey, you're at the New York Times. Do you want to input the password? I would hit yes. And then I wouldn't have to even interact with the password in any way, shape, or form. So strong passwords, length matters, and use a password manager. The ones on the left. So in the chat, I see, do you also like Norton's free password generator? I've never used Norton's free password generator, but I would generally say it's going to be good because Norton is a company that is fairly reputable and password generators are not incredibly complicated. The one thing I would say is I do not care how much you trust security.org. Do not put your actual password into this in order to test how
Okay.
secure it is. Just don't put your password anywhere but where it's supposed to be, which is your password manager and when you're logging in. So you can test your password by changing it a little bit. So for example, badness, sensuous, ellipses, crusader, you know, I could do like goodness, 8, cool, 3, circle, 4, Paragon 1, you know, and I could test that. It's kind of similar. I already know the result. It's going to be a good password, but you know, don't, if you're doing this thing where you're checking your passwords, just don't type your actual password into it, please. The ones on the left, I have on the left because they have good free versions, right? So free-ish, Bitwarden, KeePass. You can use the built-in ones with Firefox and Chrome. I don't like them as much. I'm not really going to get into it, but they're fine. I just don't like them as much. Same with Apple Keychain, and the new kid on the block is Proton Pass. And then moderately priced-ish, 1Password, Dashlane, RoboForm, LastPass. There are other options. There are a ton of options. These are just the ones I'm familiar with. Generally, whenever you're paying for a password manager, you're going to get some extra goodies. The main goodie that I think is important for people is you can have a password manager that you and your significant other have access to, but they're separate. So what I mean is person A can have their passwords, person B can have their passwords, and then you can have a shared section of passwords for like Netflix and stuff that if person A updates it, then person B has access to it. So it generally will allow you to do basic things like that for like sharing passwords back and forth if you pay money. The one interesting thing I will say with Proton Pass is it has email obfuscation. So your email address is, person@gmail.com. What you can do with Proton Pass is it can generate a random email address for you to log into a website. So if that website, for example, the Home Depot website, if the Home Depot website is hacked, the hackers will get not your email and the password. So they don't even know what email it's associated with.
So we have
It's-
sorry, Tim, we have a
Yep.
question in the room. Go ahead.
I have still a free version of 1Password. Would you recommend upgrading it to the price one?
So, did you hear
what-
that?
What was the question?
The question is, he has a free version of 1Password. Would you recommend upgrading it to the priced version?
If you like it, I would say upgrade it. I personally pay for a password manager these days. And I mean, I think the most important thing with a password manager is that you're comfortable using it. So if you're comfortable with 1Password, then, generally they're all roughly the same price and they're all pretty good. So I wouldn't say you shouldn't pay for it. But also if the free version is fulfilling your needs, then you can stick with the free version. LastPass security breach. Yep. I'm not incredibly proud of them for that. It's also one of the reasons why, in general, I will recommend. No, I won't recommend. But if people ask me what I use, I would say that Bitwarden. I really enjoy that. I like Proton Pass, but it is newer. It's not as polished. And then KeePass is also something I use frequently. But in general, Bitwarden's just my Swiss Army knife recommendation or thing I would suggest people to take a look at. The main thing with the LastPass security breach that I didn't like is they kind of hid it for a while, which is a big no-no in this area for security.
Who hit it?
The company, LastPass, they hid the breach.
Yeah, I mean, earlier on I said, right, it takes a company an average of like 197 days to figure out that it's been breached. Whenever that is a password manager, that becomes a little scarier. One thing I will say with password manager is they don't have your passwords like just stored somewhere where it's easy to find them. Everything's encrypted. It'll take, this many years to decrypt an individual password. it's not something to like, you should be aware of it, but it shouldn't cause you to lose like 10 years of your life if it happens, kind of thing. But password managers, one of my favorite topics. Patch management. Under the free-ish category on the left-hand side, I have Just Do It and Seriously. So what this means is if your computer says, hey, I'd really like to be updated now, you go to, Windows Update or the Apple Store and just say, yes, I would like to be updated. Now, expensive is very relative because this is expensive with scale. But if you want to manage, if you're a business or you want to manage multiple computers at once without having to manually go to them, Nanite is really good and PDQ is really good. One of the benefits of using a program or service such as Nanite or PDQ is you can update other things besides just the computer. You can make sure, for example, Word is up to date. You can make sure that Adobe Reader or Acrobat is up to date. It will update everything it can find on your computer to the newest version. So that's generally a good practice to update all of your programs. And it just allows you to do it, with a couple clicks versus if you have, a couple computers or like 10 computers you're managing, having to go to each one individually and make sure that it has updates for everything can be a tad onerous. Does the Home Depot breach mean that customers' passwords weren't encrypted? I believe the Home Depot breach, the problem with it was made in a store from a contractor's login, and the contractor had permissions to everything. And I forget like the specifics, but I just remember that accounts were compromised and also credit cards associated with the accounts were compromised. And that's why that was so bad. I forget if it was like passwords in plain text or not. In general, passwords are encrypted, but things can change rapidly whenever you have an administrator account. All right, so patch management, takeaway is to just do it. Training, if you want more training, or if you have a business and you would like other people to have training, KnowBe4 is good. I use it. It will catch people unawares and kind of make them realize that, yes, this is something that should be taken seriously. And right now they are running their free October, calendar of fun. I believe it's here. KnowBe4 Cybersecurity Awareness Weekly Planner. So week 1, you have some video modules you can watch. You have some interactive training modules you can watch. And it's kind of spaced out where first week you can do this stuff. Week 2, you can do this stuff, to kind of go at your own pace. And then that is it. So I do have time set aside until 2:30. So don't feel like you're keeping me around if you have questions. The middle questions took more time than I anticipated, which is perfectly fine. Questions are good. But if anyone has any questions over anything we went over, or any questions about computer security in general, or cybersecurity in general, feel free. I'm sure even if an individual is asking the question, I'm sure someone else will find the answer useful as well.
So we have a question in the room and then Linda raised her hand, and I just want everyone to know I'm sending the slides as well as this recording. So you'll have the links to the various pages that Tim has shown us. So go ahead, Diane.
I'm gonna be doing that.
As soon as I have to upload the video, so it takes a little time, but it should be in the next day or two.
Mike's, Diane, Mike's not a question, just to let everyone know that know before is really great. It's easy to use and they go over things and you can learn a lot. I recommend it. It's great.
Okay, great, thank you. And Linda, what did you? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I would like to, for Tim to really explain how you know if you need a patch management. Is that primarily in business or for a homeowner? How do you know you need a patch management?
So that's a really good question. In general, if you are an individual and whenever you sit down at your computer, you can touch all the computers you need to manage within like a 10-second walk. You don't really need patch management. So if you have 1 or 2 computers, it is not incredibly onerous to make sure that those 2 computers are updated. Patch management, like an application or a service that does it, is more for businesses, or if you have a large family and you just want to make sure that everyone's stuff is up to date and you don't want to have to rely on them to keep things up to date.
Thank
So
you.
generally, small business to medium-sized business, that's when you would start thinking about patch management.
Any more questions for anyone? Oh, yeah, we have one.
How can one protect oneself during Facebook use?
Tim, did you hear that question? It's,
Facebook.
yes, so somebody's on Facebook, how can you protect yourself?
If you are using the Facebook application on an Android phone or an iOS device, one of the things you can do is if you go into permissions, you can limit the permissions that it has access to. So what Facebook wants is they want access to everything. They want access to your location data. They want access to all of your photos. They want access to your text messages. They want access to literally everything on your phone. You can go into permissions and you can minimize what it has access to. That's basically how you can do it. If you're on a computer using Facebook, I personally would use something like a Firefox container, which allows Facebook to operate in an entirely separate browser window, essentially, that doesn't interact with your other windows. And if you need more than that, you can search like Firefox Facebook container, and that will get you started on that. But as for on mobile devices, you would basically have to go through permissions. And by default, just imagine that Facebook has access to everything.
Thank you.
And there's the question in chat.
What is the best security software for cell phones? For cell phones, it's kind of no one size fits all. So I hesitate to actually give a recommendation for that. In general, if it's a company that you recognize from like this list, I would feel fairly confident that it would do okay. If you don't recognize the name of the company that offers the protection on the cell phone, then I wouldn't do it. But in general, you would just want to make sure that your cell phone is up to date. Your cell phone system version is separately updated from your cell phone's security patches. So just make sure that you're getting the security patches. And that's also one of the reasons why I would tell someone to get a new phone is at a certain age, they will no longer get security patches. For example, with an iPhone, that is generally 6 to 7 years you'll get security updates on it. On Android phone, it is an absolute crapshoot of anywhere from no security patches to, I think, like 6 years. I know the Pixel phones are probably the best at getting security patches because it's directly from Google. It doesn't have any carrier interactions from like AT&T or Verizon to have to push it down. And those, I believe, are either 4 or 6 years of security.
Great. Any more questions for Tim? Does anybody online have any last minute questions? Well, Tim, once again, you've given us a lot to think about. Thank you, I think.
Yeah, and if anyone has any questions that they think of after the class has ended, I know that's when I always have my best questions. Feel free to email Mary, and I'll put the answers either in an email response whenever Mary sends out the notification to everybody, or I can put it in the slides as well.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you.